Okay. All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 3 of the October 2025 Mid-Atlantic Council meeting. We're going to get started here. We're starting with our business session. We're going to go into committee reports. We're going to start with the SSC report. So, Paul, if you're there and ready, we're ready for you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, everybody. I'll be reporting on the SSC meeting, and I think my slides will be popping up here in a second. We met September 9th and 10th in Baltimore, and I'll be providing an overview of that those meeting results. So I'm not seeing anything on my screen yet, so I just wanted to.
Paul, this is Brandon. I don't think I got your presentation. If you had sent something.
Oh, okay. My apologies here. I will try to share it then. Content sharing is unavailable. Okay, there we go. Okay. So do you have the presentation? Can you see it now?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. The topics we'll be considering today include, if I just wanted to. Okay. Half hour later, I'll get this going. So we addressed a number of topics, some of which have already been considered in the context of the meeting in the last 2 days. We reviewed the essential fish habitat. We examined some plans for commercial port sampling and other activities related to that. We've already spoken about spiny dogfish. We received an overview of 3 offshore wind projects, all very promising, and then continued with some marine recreational fishing program updates. And then finally, we talked rather extensively about the short-term projection issues, and I think there will be a segue into some other discussions that'll be valuable with the council. So in terms of the EFH overview, like you, we considered the outstanding progress. We noted that this project is a valuable long-term and general resource for scientists, managers, and the public. We kind of ran out of superlatives in our description of it. Of course, the scientists were interested in, what is the status of the data underlying the very valuable graphics. And it was noted that there are some concerns about confidentiality and also concerns about inappropriate use of data. And by that, I mean simply that doing analyses that aren't consistent with the original data collection design, so that you have to, respect that aspect of the underlying design before you can actually do some of the analyses. We also expressed some concern about the continuation of the project, and noting that the updating of this type of resource and its the quantity of data associated with it can be pretty daunting task, and especially under resource constraints. And then finally, we noted the value of links to other projects as being a very useful aspect of the EFH project. In terms of commercial port sampling, as many times the SSC has commented directly on the problems associated with decreased funding and decreases in the number of samples over time. This poses really a fundamental threat to sound scientific management. So the aspects of the catch and the attributes of it are essential for moving forward in terms of stock assessments and management. So we appreciated the response that the center is doing in terms of trying to integrate the port sampling with the observer program, not only for the collection of samples, but also for the more efficient use of resources. The SSC expressed a number of concerns, and these have been voiced before, of course, but some of them were related to the lack of randomness within the selection of samples. There may be some bias towards particular dealers or fishermen for collections. We felt that there would be some value in more of a comprehensive historical performance of the target and actual samples, and to see, how well has the sampling design been executed, and then are there opportunities for improved efficiency. We noted that market category is kind of a labile property, and that it really should be investigated more in the context that market category can vary regionally and in years, and certainly across years in terms of its designation with respect to size classes. We did note that an increasing loss of samples due to mixed trips. The more finely you partition the ocean in terms of stock areas, the more consequential it becomes when a fishing vessel may move across multiple stock areas. That in turn means that those samples cannot be attributed to a particular stock area. So that becomes a longer term problem. It's probably more of an issue in New England than it is in the Mid-Atlantic. And then we highlighted the value of voluntary and study fleet sampling. These are non-random samples, but they do provide some very good concrete information, and ultimately can be related to a representative sample of the population. So, all right. In terms of offshore wind projects or in wind energy areas, we reviewed 3 projects. The first of which was by Tricia Perez from Rosa. She highlighted a large database called Fish Forward, and that is considered a pretty unique and valuable resource, and we appreciate the efforts of Rosa to standardize methods across many of the wind energy projects. She highlighted some projects with acoustic methods, which should be pretty valuable in terms of being able to evaluate the concentrations around wind energy areas, and then also, importantly, the concentration profile as you move away from those areas and how that might influence subsequent sampling. We did hear a very interesting project from a postdoc at Stony Brook, who's now a professor at VIMS, and he summarized work on stock assessments that were examined in light of the potential loss of information from the wind energy areas. And so this was using the actual stock assessment data, but then looking at it in the context of what would have happened in the absence of earlier sampling design. So if those wind towers had been there, what would the effect be on the subsequent project or the assessments? And so this was viewed as a pretty novel approach, and a number of mitigation strategies that may prove to be directly useful in stock assessments under these conditions. So another project conducted at SMAST was called a survey simulation, experimentation, and evaluation project. This uses species distributions models. Jessica outlined some of those yesterday in terms of their utility within the context of the EFH. These are combined with spatial simulation models, and then allows for evaluation. And of course, there are positive and negative impacts depending upon the species. And so this design will address that and also allow for examination of alternative sampling designs. There's a lot of work being done to evaluate, how well can we manage sampling such that we do get a representative sample of the overall population abundance in these areas. So we received a review on the Marine Recreational Fishing Program, information program, and the one thing we do note is that we appreciate this process of continuing improvement in the design. Although some may consider this a flaw, it actually is, the pursuit of trying to get the best possible information about the overall fishing effort, and also to address concerns that have been raised, and valid concerns have been raised about the magnitude of fishing effort. So there was a pilot study that was done in 2024 that looked at the effect of question order. There were a few other factors they looked at, but the one that is most important is whether or not anglers were responding correctly to the original sequence. And it appears that there was some bias in those numbers, and a full report of that will be coming out shortly, I think, sometime, I guess, after government operations resume. So in terms of suggestions, the SSC has a number of individuals who have served on various National Research Council and National Academy of Science panels in terms of evaluating recreational fishing. So, we have a large number of large reservoir of talent there. So we also, had some suggestions on, trying to get some information on angling from private docks. They're currently not sampled as part of the design. That there are target species should be identified in the survey questionnaire. That might help identify sort of broad-based effort that maybe more. Right now, it's undifferentiated, and it could be more targeted with the use of something in the survey questionnaire itself. We noted that the state sampling agents, that is people with uniforms, generally increase the responsiveness for angler interviews, and there's points for and against this approach. Some of them were mentioned yesterday during the council session. We also noted that the so-called social desirability, that is the fact that fishermen want to be identified as fishermen and therefore would tend to overrepresent what they caught in the last 2 months. That may be offset somewhat by those wishing to remain anonymous. So there was that issue was raised. One issue that doesn't get much attention, but so-called digit bias, that is, people report a lot of 5s and 10s, but relatively few 4s and 7s in that. And so it's something that might be biasing estimates either high or low. That there are some techniques that in the survey literature and certainly across many other disciplines with use of non-random sampling, that is responsiveness from cell phone apps and things of that sort. So you can get very precise information, but you don't know how representative it is of the overall population since it's a self-selected sample. And then we noted that, and this will certainly be a discussion carried out by the council, by the national transition team, and many others in terms of, what's the utility of incremental improvements to the design versus this larger scale disruption that occurs, as to the assessment process, to catch monitoring, and ultimately management. We did take a look at some of the short-term projection issues. In July of this year, as you know, when we were considering black sea bass, the SSC recommended setting the ABCs in the projection years equal to the ABC that would be obtained by applying the fishing mortality proxy to the terminal year abundance. Well, what does that mean? It means that you get the stock assessment, and then rather than conducting a projection forward in terms of the consequences of fishing at various rates for an extended period, we would simply argue that doing that same computation, computing an OFL, deriving an ABC from that, and then using that as a constant value in the next years would be sufficient. Now, the simulation exercises have suggested that this approach does have some general utility, and we were also informed by some of the issues related to recent projection performance. Black sea bass is one. We talked a little bit about some of the concerns with spiny dogfish yesterday. So those are sort of things that ultimately we will want to roll into this sort of discussion. This is coupled with a more challenging aspect, which is the less frequent assessments that are likely. Those are the full scope of these are still being realized, so to speak, and they are essentially unknown at this point. But these two aspects have some important consequences for setting regulations over the next few years. We did recommend that in order to make a working group effective, we want to engage colleagues at the Science Center to be involved in this process, so that everyone's sort of on the same page, so to speak. And then an issue that we did talk about yesterday with respect to spiny dogfish is sort of this important notion of improved dialogue discussion with the council. There's no real value in us going different ways or creating unnecessary friction. We certainly try to avoid that as much as possible, but it is something that we are concerned about, and each of us is sort of working, or each individual essentially works under some implicit discount rates. How much do you value future information, and how do you act on it in terms of behavior? And so one way of addressing that would be to sort of maybe do some case studies with respect to the council and the SSC in terms of risk-prone versus risk-averse types of decisions. We did receive some public comment. One of the more pertinent ones was this challenge of National Standard 1, which has sort of a dual objective of preventing overfishing and achieving optimal yield. And optimal yield is achieved given that overfishing does not occur. But there was some issues raised about how can we utilize healthy stocks more liberally? Can you relax the provisions of overfishing when stocks are at very high levels. The argument being, why give them up? Why give up a valuable resource to natural mortality, so to speak? Take more of it on the way down. It's a delicate kind of topic, both in terms of control, but also in terms of legal matters. So it's not one to take lightly. Second was sort of one concern voiced many times, I think, at the council as well. The assessments keep getting better, but the uncertainty increases and catches go down. So what gives? We also received a comment related to the value of large females for stock stability, sort of the unknown effects of nanoplastics and on larval fish in terms of a mortality source, and then finally some of the likely effects of electromagnetic fields by wind energy areas and so forth on fish behavior. So in terms of other business, we intend to meet later in October to talk about Atlantic mackerel and some of the issues were discussed on Tuesday. We're going to have a member that participate in the joint Mid-Atlantic and South Atlantic Committee on Bluefish Tile Allocation. The longfin squid research track is still underway and scheduled for review in March 26, and there will be a management track shortly thereafter in June for that purpose. And then finally, we did talk about some of the concerns related to the reduced assessment frequency, the basis for the decision, some of the topics I discussed earlier, but also sort of echoed a need for some data moderate methodology. So those are the kind of other topics. But so I thank you for your time and welcome any questions you may have concerning aspects of our report. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I do have a few comments, but let's go to questions first. Are there any questions from council members for Paul and the SSC? Okay, I see Michelle Duvall, and then I'm going to go to Ted Platt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Paul, for the great report. And just one question on the port sampling. I'm trying to recall, during that presentation, was there any mention of, I don't know, I guess like maybe any simulation studies or anything like that with respect to, the effects of the reduced port sampling on, other parts of the science enterprise? I know that this sort of merger of, the port sampling and at-sea observer program is supposed to bring some efficiencies and, with respect to resources. But I was trying to recall if there was any mention of, some, more quantitative analysis of what that, reduced port sampling is doing, or how the shortcomings at that reduced port sampling might affect.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Michelle. There were, some tangential comments that it would be valuable to have sort of a more comprehensive overview of the program. I think the primary focus at this point was trying to get the pieces together in terms of how it might operate functionally with respect to individuals having dual responsibilities for port sampling and observer coverage. So that was more the focus of this aspect. But there were a number of comments that were raised that noted that exercise exactly like you specified is appropriate. That would include not only the efficacy of the past designs, but also what is sort of a minimal sufficient sampling regime for going forward under reduced constraints. So if reduced sampling is the reality, then it behooves everyone to find out how to best use those limited resources and not simply assume that the past designs are sufficient. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you both. Thank you, Michelle, for the question. I'm going to go to Chris Moore, and then Ted, I'm going to go to you, and then Chris Bat-Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Michelle, your question is a good one. And certainly we have talked about this port sampling, biological port sampling program for the last, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, as we struggled with reduced resources, reduced money in terms of the contract to get the work done. And remember, folks around the table, that the council actually supplemented that program and is continuing to supplement that program this year. So obviously very important to the council, very important that data get collected. The other thing I'd like to point out is that it is an agenda item for the upcoming NRCC meeting to have the conversation about the port sampling program and this combination now with the Observer program. So we're obviously very interested in hearing the service tell us where we're at with that, explain to us what's going on. But the issues relative to the direct issues relative to how the lack of data is impacting stock assessments and our ability to make informed decisions is something that we may turn to the SSC to help us with. So I thought I'd add that. And before I turn it over to Ted, the other question I have for you, Paul, is explain to me the data moderate methodology again. Can you explain to me what that means? Like, where it's obviously like not just data, but there's something else. What's the other part of it?
Sure. Yeah, one of the issues that may be relevant is sort of the use of age length keys. So there are ways of borrowing information across years that might be useful. These can serve as sort of interim patches related to shortfalls in given years. Now, that's not a long-term solution because ultimately you're borrowing from poor neighbors to make inferences about the future. There are some techniques that are being used on the West Coast for some of their groundfish stocks, and I know some individuals at the center have expressed some interest in pursuing some of those methods as a potential way of addressing the shortfalls. And so from the standpoint of the SSC, it would prefer to have more frequent updates of information and to strike a balance between having a comprehensive full-blown stock assessment versus having only a data update or having no information in the interim periods there. So the idea is to find something that works, that's in between what we're currently doing and what we anticipate the future was going to look like. I believe they are reaching out to some colleagues on the West Coast, primarily at the Alaska Center, for just to see what extent those methods may be useful.
Thanks, Paul. Who's they? Who's reaching out?
Is Kirsten Curdy was the individual I was talking about. She's on the assessment working group and has indicated that they are trying to coordinate some of this stuff.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you both. I'm going to go to Ted and then Chris Batsavage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for that presentation, Paul. I guess my question is about optimum yield, and obviously this is a term that has a lot of possible definitions. And so, as a manager, I tend to think of optimum yield over a longer term. I think as managers, we kind of want to manage in a decadal sort of perspective and see what our optimum yield is over the long haul. And to use, say, Dogfish as an example, we're in this boom and bust cycle because if on an annualized basis we pursue optimum yield, we tend to crash the stock because fishery tends to harvest mostly large females. I'm just looking for some clarity on your perspective as a scientist and a member of the SSC in terms of the SSC's role. I kind of see that as interpreting optimum yield as an annualized consideration, separate from, the interests of, say, long-term stability that serves the interests of businesses and fishermen. Just kind of curious to see, your take on optimum yield and how you view that.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question, Ted, and really it's kind of highlights the sort of myopic nature of the current process. The SSCs are asked to address what is allowable in the current year and in the foreseeable future, and those are done by examining the stock projections. And you string a sequence of these myopic decisions together and hope that you're achieving something that's in line with the productivity of the resource, and we call that the maximum sustainable yield, and that changes over time and everything. So there is a need, although the decisions are short term, there is a desire and a reflection on the fact that you do have a certain capacity of this resource and its ability to sustain harvest. You do not want to be riding waves of year class strengths or following the troughs as well, but sometimes it really is necessary to put the brakes on hard in order to do that. Now, in terms of the something like spiny dogfish, it seems like that is one where you do have a resource that is a longer term frequency, if you will. And right now the stock condition is really dictated by what happened 10, 11 years ago, as opposed to what happened 1 or 2 years ago, as we saw for like Atlantic mackerel. So those are two ends of the spectrum in terms of the resource, but in terms of how we move forward, what is optimum, there's not a whole lot of guidance with respect to sort of the damping that essentially your question implies in terms of the frequency of intervention with respect to management and then sort of the dynamics of the stock itself. I think, again, apologies for going too long here, but I think what is clear is that under Magnuson, optimum yield is something that exists under the overfishing limit. So it's not something that is thought to be allowable in the context of overfishing in a short-term basis in order to take advantage, so to speak, of a higher abundance, that is abundance greater than the biomass at maximum sustainable yield. So apologies for the long-winded answer, but I hope it clarifies at least some of the issues.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Great, thanks for the question. Chris Batsavage?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound good, Chris.
Thanks. Thank you, Paul, for the report. Back to the subject of commercial port sampling, because it's more of a comment, but and this will likely come up at the NRCC meeting later this month. But the Northeast Fisheries Science Center held a workshop with the states in the Mid-Atlantic to get a better sense of what kind of commercial port sampling is being done at the state level. This goes back to the concerns Chris talked about over the last several years, and it's been talked about at the SMFC, of ways to maybe supplement the commercial sampling through either the existing state programs or maybe rework state programs. I think it was more fact finding at this point. But I think there's certainly some opportunities for more state port sampling of the commercial fisheries to be integrated in these stock assessments to help some of the shortfalls that are occurring at the federal level, while recognizing that the states are also resource limited, but maybe combining the efforts will help improve the situation that we currently find ourselves in. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. That's I should have brought that up. It overlapped exactly with the MRIP review that was occurring that same day, but I was aware that there was the special multi-day examination of state-specific port sampling. So thank you for bringing that up.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Chris, I appreciate you bringing that up as well. So I don't see any other hands, but I don't want it to be lost. It wasn't as much in Paul's slides here as in a couple of the summary slides yesterday. The SSC's concern for exactly what we asked them to do for spiny dogfish. And out of that came the notion that there may need to be more discussions between the SSC and the council. We've met in person before in this very room, I believe, Chris, right? The SSC was invited. It's a very large group. It's not always easy to do that. But I definitely see a need for further communication, especially because, one of the SSC's concerns that is listed here is that we may be in a situation where we don't have the most up-to-date and best information available when making decisions. And so, their ability to communicate all of, the added uncertainty to what we're so used to, what does an update mean? What does just if we're only getting a landings update versus maybe a turn of the crank assessment. So I think the easiest way to handle this, Paul, and I hope you'll weigh in as well, is for us here at the front of the table, Chris and I and Skip, and work with Brandon and you to possibly present some ideas to the council and SSC on ways that we could have additional communications. And I think Chris mentioned an item. Chris, if you wouldn't mind talking about kind of a white paper on this. And Paul, you also mentioned that the SSC will take a look at some case studies. I think that'll be very valuable. So Chris, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the white paper for a second.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So Brandon and I have had a number of conversations over the last couple of years, as we've had some issues that have caused a little bit of friction between the council and the SSC as it relates to several species. And one of the things that I thought might be useful for council consideration is a paper that's very similar to the paper that is in the briefing book relative to the monitoring committees. So basically developing a white paper that says, this is the role and responsibility of the SSC. This is how the SSC works with the council as it goes through its decision-making process and identifies ABC and other things that we need to decide on. So I think we'll have that paper in December for the council to look at. I think that could be the basis for a joint meeting between the council and the SSC to consider what's in the white paper. One of the things that Paul and Brandon and I have talked about and will be part of this paper is the governance part. Like, who's on first? Well, it's the council, right? And sometimes that's a little difficult for the SSC to sort of wrestle with, but we have, responsibilities and we have decision-making process that's more than what the SSC provides. Right? So I think all of that could be part of this conversation that we have. And just thinking out loud, we would schedule that if folks are supportive of that, schedule a joint meeting sometime in early 2026. The other part of the discussion could be the part that we just talked about, which is decision-making in an environment where we have very limited resources. Like, what are we going to do? How's it going to work? So maybe that's part of the meeting as well. So anyway, that's just a couple ideas, a couple things to think about.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And I'll just add, looking at both the council and ASMFC's charge, there's always this want to have standardization amongst, policy on how we handle things. But there's no question that with every species, there's some uniqueness to it. We're a council that manages ocean quahog and squid. So good luck with that in a way. But, I think the socioeconomic parts that we're struggling with spiny dogfish is a uniqueness, even if, the uncertainty in the assessments and the information that we're able to manage on may have similarities with many other species and frustrations with many other data streams. But I think, that, Paul, to me, one of the crux of this whole issue is spiny dogfish unique? Or, I had the feeling that, the SSC's concern is don't let this become policy. And so, I think one of the questions between the council and the SSC is, is that an understanded item amongst everyone that, what is happening with spiny dogfish is unique and not policy? So I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, thanks. I think you cast the issues well. It is unique in the context that you do have a very limited processing capacity that is at risk from the curtailment of future catches, and we certainly appreciate that. I think where the SSC is coming in is that, as you said, you do not want this to become a policy that's broadly applied. I think one of the hallmarks of the Mid-Atlantic Council is that it has adhered to doing things that are consistent with the underlying science, and that the success that has occurred with summer flounder, black sea bass, scup, in terms of very massive rebuilding and supporting much larger fisheries than they otherwise would have, is in fact related to the council actions. So, and I think that distinguishes this council from many others in terms of that type of approach. So, we are concerned that things of this type become more frequent. Of for for spiny dogfish as a whole, the risk, and I'm speaking personally now, not directly on for the SSC, but the risk associated with going from a 1% harvest to 1.1% harvest is likely to be non-catastrophic. But it's one that if you take a step in a direction you don't want to go, you can be in have some real consequences at a later time. So I think the decisions that you all have to deal with, and the balancing act is certainly something that not everyone on the SSC perhaps fully appreciates, and that would be a valuable component of the decision-making process, and also some interaction, however that might occur in early 2026.
Yeah, thank you. Right. I completely agree. We have, we both have our roles here, and I think regular reminders are the best way forward. So, we will work to improve communication between the two. And it isn't so much necessarily that it needs to be improved. It needs to be maintained at a high level. And I think, we'll work to do that. So thank you again, Paul. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think there is some value in some what they call creative tension, or whatever that is, that between groups, that sometimes that is kind of a valuable property of organizational interactions. But thank you.
Yes, no, and thank you as well. Okay, so with that, I'm going to, before I go to the executive director's report, I'm going to give a quick update on what happened at the executive committee, and then apologies to the RA, who might be the only organizational report today, but because we do have a scheduling issue, I'm going to go to the liaison reports after Chris. XCOM had two major items. Many of you were actually at the open session of executive committee. During the closed session, executive committee did have a candidate for the Rick C. Savage Award, and that candidate was chosen. So we will be announcing that as soon as that individual is available to be presented with the award at hopefully the December meeting, but we'll see how that goes. And then we discussed the 2026 implementation plan, and so the executive committee did put forward with some slight modifications a draft of what's to come in 2026, and the full council will see that in December. Chris, anything else to add there? Oh, great, excellent. And with that, then I'll turn it over to you for the executive director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. There's a number of items behind the tab. It's tab 14 that I'd like to discuss with you this morning. Mary's going to help me with the slides. There's the list of the council plan meeting topics for our December meeting, which is the first thing behind the tab. Our December meeting is going to be in DC, and it's going to be at the Madison Hotel, which is a new venue for us. So we're looking forward to seeing that and seeing how that works out for the council. I'm also very cognizant of the dates. These are typically, we don't meet this late in December. We had some scheduling difficulties with the other councils and had to move it to later in the month. It's likely that we'll have a late warning start on Tuesday, and go through Thursday, at least till noon on Thursday. So full week. We have a full week because we're meeting with the MAFMC boards. We're meeting with the Summer Flounder Scup Black Sea Bass Board. We're also meeting with Policy Board. We'll be meeting with those boards to talk about recreational management measures for those species, and also be meeting with the Policy Board to talk about the rec sector separation amendment. So we hope to approve a range of alternatives for that particular amendment in December. So hopefully that'll happen. A couple other things on the list, mackerel framework. Jason's talked about that, which includes that conversation about shad and river herring. As Joe just indicated, we hope to also present the Rick C. Savage Award. One of the other things that we thought about this week, and thanks to Ted for this, is that we put a dogfish framework on the agenda for December as a possibility. So thanks, Ted. That's a great idea. So basically, this meeting, our meeting, will occur 2 weeks after the New England meeting. So that gives us time to package anything that we need to package relative to dogfish, if in fact they do something different than we do, and make that part of our meeting in December and accelerate the process a little bit as it relates to the dogfish framework. So we'll see. Next item, a number of background documents, typical reference documents that I talk about at every meeting. I say the same thing. They're a good reference document. Take a look at them if you are, if you forgot what these amendments and frameworks are about. They include amendments and frameworks that we're working on. There's also a document detailing the timeline and status of amendments, those amendments and frameworks that have been submitted to NIMS for review and approval. We did have good news. We have a proposed rule on the summer flounder mesh exemption framework. So remember that, something that we took action on last year. There's 2 other things on that list that we're hoping that we get proposed rules for soon, including that surf clam and ocean quahog amendment. That obviously we're hoping those things happen once the government reopens. There's also a document detailing timeline and status of current and upcoming specifications. You can take a look at that. Long list, just giving you details relative to when those things were submitted and when we hope to have those published. And the next item behind the tab is a table that I'm sure if John Hare was here, we would talk about. This is the agreed upon schedule for 2026 as it relates to stock assessments. So it includes something that we've talked about a couple times this week, which is the research and management track assessments for longfin squid. Those are important. I'm glad those are going to get done in 2026. There's also on that list data and projection updates for 2 of our other species, butterfish and quahogs. I'll stop there, see if there's any questions before I go on to the next item. Any questions about any of that? Okay, this evening. The next item behind the tab is something we've talked about a couple times. That's a document that I asked Julia to put together for me, working with the other staff, to clarify the role of the monitoring committees. So I asked her to do this because we had a number of questions. We had a good conversation, good discussion at the last meeting about what the monitoring committee is supposed to do. So in I think 6 or 7 pages, there's a lot there, but certainly just highlighting a couple of the things that the staff put together. The monitoring committees play an important role in specification setting process. If you look at the various FMPs and regulations, it spells out many different times of catch and landing limits and other management measures that the monitoring committees recommend to the council through specifications. It also clarifies, and this was a question that came up in August, that the monitoring committees can consider management uncertainty, scientific uncertainty, optimum yield, and other factors when making their recommendations. But the bottom line, the bottom line for all of this is that last paragraph. And Julia and staff note that the council is not bound by the recommendations of the monitoring committee and can modify their recommendations or develop, some other specifications, higher or lower, as long as they're consistent with the FMP, consistent with the Magnuson Act and any other applicable law. So that's the important point. That's the important takeaway. So just quickly, Julia, I know that you're on. Is there anything that I missed or anything you want to add?
Nope, I think that covers it.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for working with staff and the rest of the staff for putting that together. Again, a good resource document. And as an aside, we expect that we'll have a similar paper for the council to look at relative to the SSC in December. The next item behind the tab is the Protected Resources Pulse. It's the newsletter that Hayden puts together for us, basically to keep us informed about protected resources issues that are relevant to the council. Number of items behind there. Certainly I'm not going to read the newsletter to you, but one of the things that the newsletter has been focused on for the last couple times we talked about it, is that alternative gear marking framework, right? So the alternative gear marking framework that we talked about this week, New England Council delayed action on that framework. We did as well yesterday. ASMSC is also going to talk about it at their upcoming Lobster Management Board meeting. There's a couple of other things that Hayden wanted me to flag to or to point out to the council regarding implementation of import provisions under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. NOAA Fisheries has reviewed about 2,500 fisheries across 135 countries to determine whether they meet U.S. standards for protecting marine mammals during commercial fishing. And starting January 1, some of those countries will be prohibited from importing fish and fish products from non-compliant fisheries into the United States. And you can take a look at the link that Hayden provides in that newsletter if you're interested in that particular item. Any questions about those before I move on? Okay. Next is an item that we talk about at every meeting. This is something that Julia puts together for us, and this is the update on offshore wind energy development. As many of you have probably seen in the news, the Trump administration issued a stop work order for the Revolution Wind project off of Rhode Island and Massachusetts. The order cited unspecified concerns related to national security, prevention of interference with reasonable uses of the EEZ. The construction of that particular project was 80% complete at the time of the stop work order, and the project developer sued, and judge ordered the stop work order to be lifted, and construction has since resumed. Another thing in the newsletter that may be of interest is that BOEM is seeking to revoke their previous approvals of the construction and operation plans for the U.S. wind project off of Maryland and Delaware, and the South Coast wind project off of Massachusetts. The administration has also indicated an intent to do the same thing for the New England wind project off of Massachusetts and the Atlantic Shores project off of New Jersey. However, motions to that effect have not yet been filed for those particular projects. Another item in there that is of interest, or maybe of interest, the Department of Transportation announced it would cancel or withdraw $679 million in funding for 12 other offshore wind projects across the country. And also included in that withdrawal of projects to develop or upgrade several ports. Again, those are just some of the highlights. There's a number of items in the memo, and certainly take a look at that if you haven't. Also, remember there's a website that Mary manages for both councils that includes all this information as well. The next item behind the tab is something that we've been looking at for a while as well. Every council meeting, we've had an update on our IRA projects. So Brandon's going to talk about those very quickly. In addition to our usual memo, Brandon and Kylie and Mary thought it might be a good idea to put together some fact sheets. So those 8 fact sheets are in the briefing book for you to look at, contain the information, the important information for each one of those projects. We expect that those projects will continue. We have the money for those projects. The folks that are doing the work, the contractors, are busy. And certainly we expect that we will start looking at the results of those projects in 2026. And certainly all of them will be completed by 2027, by the end of 2027. So with that, Brandon, you want to just talk about what's in that package?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Chris. Just real briefly, as Chris had indicated, there's 2 pieces of material in the briefing book on the IRA projects. One is our standard memo that we've been providing for each meeting as part of the ED report, and we'll continue to provide those updates. And so what we've been doing is any sort of significant updates that have taken place for a particular project since your last report, we've included in that briefing memo. But as Chris had indicated, we thought it might be a good idea to develop something else to provide on our IRA projects, particularly as new council members come on board or as the public really begins to look at the projects as we begin to develop them and as some of them become finalized. Folks may not know what these projects are if you're just looking at that briefing memo that you see every other month. And so we put these one-pagers together to really just be a high-level overview of what the project entails. And so we develop them for all 8 projects, and it just gives a short description of the project, what are the project objectives and what we hope to gain out of each project, who's involved, so who are the contractors doing the work, and we have oversight teams for all of those projects, and so who's participating in those. We've also identified the staff lead. So if you have questions about a particular project, you know who you can reach out to on council staff for any questions. And then there's a short timeline to give you a sense of when some of the bigger activities either took place or we think are going to take place over the next year and a half. And these are products that are very similar to the New England Council has a one-pager very similar for their projects, and so does the South Atlantic. Actually, we borrowed it from South Atlantic sheets that they had. And so we have a consistent format. The information in them is a little bit different across the 3 councils, but it's very similar in terms of its layout and structure. So certainly if you have any questions or feedback on those, let us know. Those one-pagers are all posted on our IRA page, and you can, look at each particular project as where you're interested. And then I just want to touch upon the project updates themselves. I won't cover all 8 of them, but just 3 of them and really quick. The SCUP GRA project that we have, IRA project number 2. The one thing I did want to note is we are planning the second industry workshop for that project. It's scheduled for November 20th. So we're going to be meeting with industry to go over some of the modeling efforts and the data collection that the contractors have been working on there. It's going to be a follow-up from the first industry workshop that was held last November. And so as that information gets sort of finalized, we'll make sure everybody knows about that workshop so we can get as many people participating in that project as possible. IRA 3, which is our governance project, looking at governance processes. We do have a contractor now for that project. Kimberly Gordon and Deirdre Bolke are supporting that project. So there's a lot happening there. We are coordinating. The South Atlantic and New England also have governance projects. So there's a lot of behind the scenes work coordinating with the other 2 councils in regards to all of our governance projects to make sure that those things work together, and we're looking at coordinated workshops. And then lastly, IRA Project 5, which is looking at ecosystem and habitat indicators and how we integrate them into the management process. Sarah Gachis and Gavin Fay are our contractors on that and are hard at work. One thing I did want to note, we are looking to hold a workshop for that project as well, hopefully by the end of the year. So things are getting tight, but so I'm going to be reaching out. That first workshop will be with council members, AP members, scientists, to try to get together to talk about indicators and sort of our management priorities of where that kind of information could support management decisions. So folks will start to see an email from me looking to set up that workshop relatively soon. And so that's the quick update on the IRA projects. Thanks.
Thank you, Brandon. Any questions before we move on? Okay. The continuing with the executive director tab, there's the next item behind the tab is a memo to Kelly Dennett, who's the director of NOAA's Fisheries Office of Sustainable Fisheries. It's from the Regional Fishery Management Council's executive directors. The topic is aligning council and NOAA priorities and future planning. So an important topic. It's a follow-on to a conversation that we started at this last May's CCC meeting. We had a webinar, we being the executive directors, to continue discussing aligning council and NOAA priorities and talking about planning, given the changes in resources to NOAA fisheries. The executive directors identified specific needs that we thought we needed from NOAA fisheries in order to continue council operations and adapt to reduced resources and their reduced capacity to support science and management. So these are things that we've talked about at this particular meeting and in prior meetings. one of the things, I'm not going to read the entire memo to you, but one of the things to point out, a couple things to point out. The executive directors recommend that those needs that we reference be considered at, that are being considered a national, should be considered at the national level, but aligning priorities for science and management should be conducted at the regional level. So take it away from the national perspective, move it to the region, which we do and have done and continue to do in our region through the NRCC. So if you look at the NRCC agenda, or if you look at past NRCC meetings over the last year or so, these are the things that we've talked about. We want to continue to have those conversations at the regional level. The memo details the recommendations of the executive directors regarding immediate needs, short-term needs, medium-term planning, and long-term expectations. So again, if you haven't had a chance, take a look at that particular memo, and certainly if you have any questions, be glad to try to answer them today. The next item behind the tab in the briefing book is the MREP flyer. This flyer is for the 2026 Greater Atlantic Fisheries Science and Management Workshop scheduled for January 12th through 16th, basically indicating that if you're interested, how to apply to participate in that particular workshop. I know that there's folks around this table that are involved in, are on the steering committee and have helped the MREP folks with this particular workshop. I know that there's folks around this table that probably will be attending that particular workshop. So again, we encourage that participation. Certainly, if in fact, you know, folks that might be interested in attending the program, get this flyer to them, and all the information they need is in the flyer. I referenced CCC and NRCC meetings. We have a couple coming up over the next couple months. Those agendas are linked to the briefing book. If you're interested, take a look at those, and certainly we can talk about any of the topics. The other thing that's in the briefing book is the letter that we developed in response to the executive order on restoring American seafood competitiveness. So that's the topic, remember, that we discussed. I think we discussed it over 2 meetings. We agreed to a list in August. And that list is included in the letter. Mary put the letter together for us. Thank you, Mary. And we got it submitted on time by September 30th, which was the request. There's a bunch of other letters and a bunch of other, as you might expect from, a bunch being 7 more of these from the other councils. And if you're interested, those are available and posted on our website. So you can certainly take a look at those. I started sending them out and then I stopped. I'm like, you know, I just didn't want to overwhelm you all with all of those. But yeah, it's interesting if you go around the country and look at the other councils, how they responded to this executive order as well. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Mary to talk about our plans, possible plans, draft plans for our 50th anniversary. So this is something that she's put together for us, a communication plan working with Hayden. So Mary, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Today, I'm just going to do kind of a brief, broad brush strokes of the plan for next year, hit on the highlights. So as Chris mentioned, next year will be the 50th anniversary of the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act, which wasn't actually called that when it was passed, but that's what created the councils. So this gives us an opportunity to reflect on our history, highlight successes, and then also engage stakeholders and the public in the management process. So the goals for this 50th anniversary campaign are to highlight our role and accomplishments in managing fisheries over the last 50 years, increase awareness about the council and ways to get involved in the council process, which is more generally one of our ongoing goals that's highlighted in our strategic plan. Also to garner support from fishermen and other stakeholders for the council process and the science that supports it. And then to celebrate the successful collaboration of fishermen, scientists, managers, and other stakeholders in stewarding sustainable fisheries in the region. Because the council process is truly unique, and this is a great opportunity for us to highlight that. So we have a few things planned for next year. I guess developing, beginning development of these things now and then rolling them out into next year. So we're going to add a 50th anniversary landing page on our website, which will serve as the hub for all of the materials and information that I'm about to talk about. On this page, we're planning to have an interactive timeline. Many of you have probably seen these on other websites where you can kind of move through time and see different milestones. And so that'll include some photos and media and just descriptions of things that have happened over the council's 50-year history. So that might include rebuilding successes, legislative milestones, significant council actions, innovations, and evolution in management. Anybody has suggestions on this or any other things that I mentioned on these slides, I am all ears. So my inbox is open for suggestions and feedback. In addition to that timeline, we're planning to develop some featured content to go on the website and then also distributed via newsletter. We're planning to have kind of two different series of articles. One would be council voices and or stories about past and present council process participants. So council members, SSC members, advisors, assessment scientists, and others who have played a role in the council process over the last 50 years. We're hoping that this will be an opportunity to kind of document their experiences and expertise and different perspectives on what has worked, what has been challenging, how has the process changed over the years, and then kind of what might we look forward to in the next 50 years and beyond. And then the second series of articles we're referring to as management milestones right now. Originally, it was success stories, but we kind of thought that we don't want it to be overly focused on just successes because there are also challenges in there and other important aspects of the council history that are important to talk about as well. But these would sort of focus on a few select key events and milestones in the council's history. For example, stock rebuilding successes, deep sea coral management, the council's management of forage species, development of the ecosystem approach to fisheries management, and that sort of thing. So again, if anyone has suggestions on topics you would like to see featured, please reach out. In addition, we are planning to do a photo contest. I think Chris mentioned during the implementation plan discussion that we are always looking to expand our photo library. We would really like to have more photos of people fishing, pictures of fish, anything that can give the public a better idea of what fisheries look like in the region. So we're hoping that by doing this contest, we can get some fresh content for our website and for our other communication products. We're also planning to have a press release around the time of the 50th anniversary in April that will announce the anniversary and then highlight these things that we've developed. And then we might do some additional targeted media engagement throughout the year to kind of pitch some 50th themed stories. And then this one is tentative, but we have talked about doing an anniversary themed event in conjunction with the June meeting in Washington, D.C. So details on that are still TBD. Here is just kind of a broad timeline of next steps and timing for next year. We are aiming to have the webpage and the timeline, like the interactive timeline and press release done in April, and then roll out the feature stories over the course of the rest of the year, and then have some kind of wrap-up piece in December. And that's all I have for this presentation. Any feedback is welcome now or later, and yeah, it's kind of a fun thing to do compared to some of the other more challenging things that the council deals with. So I hope that this will be a fun project for all of us.
Okay, thank you, Mary. It will be a fun project. Mary will update us at future council meetings as to progress relative to this timeline. Certainly, I would encourage anyone that is interested to provide additional ideas to Mary. Certainly, there's a lot there. But yeah, I think it will be fun and certainly well deserved. The 50th anniversary is a big deal. So for some of us who've been around for many of those decades and can think about some of the folks that we should interview for stories or highlight, again, let Mary know. Okay. So any questions, comments at this point for Mary? Yeah, Jim Gilmore.
Just quickly, and that all sounds great, Mary. Just are there going to be any thoughts of some tangible things? Because for instance, the commission did their 75th anniversary, and they did a sort of a history book of it, which is really one of my favorite coffee table things. And my son actually works for the State Parks Department, and they do things like commemorative coins, things like that. So is there any ideas about some more tangible things that would be nice for little takeaways?
We did talk recently about a commemorative coin. So I didn't want to put that on the slides because it's not definitive yet, and we'll need to look into the cost of various tangible products. But you know, I don't know if a coffee table book is in the cards right now. That might be more of a question for Chris, but I think that what we could definitely commit to is having some form of printed products available for distribution at council meetings, and then also for anyone who wants to take those back to share with your constituents or contacts, that could be available.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. So there are budgetary concerns relative to what we're going to be able to do. And I'm not sure about the book, but we'll see. And certainly we need to be flexible and adapt as I get more information on our budget for 2026. But I'm hoping that we're at least level funded and that there will be some money to conduct important outreach, including, you know, maybe this commemorative coin or other things for our 50th anniversary. Okay, anything else? Any other questions or comments? Yes, Sunny.
Yeah, where would you send the photos? Is there the photos?
Yeah, so Mary can set up, she'll send an email out basically indicating how those can be submitted to her. There's something called metadata, which is basically like, where was the photo taken, who took the photo, what's in the photo. There's some of that we may need if in fact we want to sort things out in the library. So Mary will work with you on that and certainly provide additional information for folks so that we can get those photos submitted to her. Mary?
So if any council members have photos that you're just like dying to send me, you can send them to me now, but we will have like an announcement and a formal submission form with instructions, because we will need people to check a box that says, I'm okay with the council using this photo with attribution, and make sure everybody's clear on the terms of use. But council members, feel free to send me photos anytime. We would love that.
Okay, anything else? So I think there's only one person around this table that's actually driven an ROV, and that's Tori. And Tori, oh, you too? Oh, sorry. So yeah, so two people. There's two people around there. What? All right, yeah. I've never driven an ROV. That's why I'm so amazed that the folks could do that. But anyway, Tori did it recently because she was on a NOAA research cruise looking at the Hudson Canyon. And she was actually on that cruise for 2 weeks and was invited to participate, and which was a very cool thing for a staffer to be able to do. So I encouraged her to do it. She was able to do it. So I asked her to give a brief overview of what happened on the cruise. And certainly folks saw the emails that I sent out that allowed you to link to, you know, the video and see some videos and see some of the cool things that they saw. But anyway, Tori, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me this morning. As Chris said, I went on the Hudson Canyon expedition. It was 2 weeks long in the Hudson Canyon. We were on the NOAA ship Nancy Foster, which you see here is in front of the New York City skyline. So that was actually a photo from our trip. We had to go into the harbor for bad weather for a day. And it actually turned out great because we had somebody deliver us cannolis. So somebody had a friend who had a media boat and they wanted to deliver us pizzas, but the chefs had already started cooking. So they decided dessert was better, so we got cannolis delivered. So yeah, it was a nice trip and also a beautiful view of New York as well. So, yeah, as Chris said, we used an ROV, the Global Explorer. We conducted seven visual surveys, and so you can see the ROV screen that the ROV pilot gets to see. So they're have a forward-facing camera as well as a down camera, and then they can also see all of their equipment in there. Well, underneath the ocean, we collected coral samples and sediment samples, also gathered eDNA, and then at night we had the ship do side scan sonar to do bathymetry for us. So we had really high resolution maps to work with every day. So my main role on this trip was doing dive site selection. So I used the bathymetry to create slope maps. I also looked at the backscatter to try to identify promising habitats. So it was kind of, we had some preliminary sites picked out, but then day by day I would go through, look at the maps and try to pick out the best spots to find deep sea corals. And so I also participated in a few other things. I'm collecting the eDNA water samples there, helping with mud samples, and then I also got to drive the ROV for a few minutes. So luckily I didn't crash it into anything. We had on the last day, we'd seen some corals throughout the trip, but not as many as we were hoping for. On the last day, we had time for one short dive. So I picked out a shallow site, and then we went down and we found a ton of corals. So I don't think we're officially calling this a coral garden yet. I think it's kind of a specific term, but it was definitely a previously unknown coral community. So we were able to spend, I think, about 3 hours diving on this site, and the entire wall was covered in with corals of different species. There's a skate there checking out the corals. And then here's one of the, I think this one was called a bubblegum coral. And then we also have lasers that the ROV can send out, which are used for measurements. And so that's 10 centimeters apart and gives us an idea of how big the different corals are. It's a little hard to see here, but if you see all these little bright, shiny eyes, those are all shrimp living all over the corals. So as we know, corals provide a lot of great habitat for other species. So why is this relevant to the Mid-Atlantic Council? So the Hudson Canyon provides a lot of habitat. And so here you see these are white hake, which is a New England managed species, and there are just tons of them living in this little rock crevice here. So it was a really great opportunity. The Hudson Canyon hasn't been explored in detail, and so it was a great opportunity to go there. Even if we didn't find quite as many corals as we hoped, we did find a ton of other things, fish and other interesting habitats. So that can kind of feed into some of our essential fish habitat and also help with our fishery management plans as well. So kind of why this matters overall. So the Hudson Canyon is under consideration as a marine sanctuary. And so we can use this information to help with council decisions, things about habitat protection, fishing access, and any other ocean planning. So thanks. I really appreciate the opportunity to go to sea. It was a really great chance for me to use some of my skills for like actual ocean exploration, which I really enjoyed. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tori. Questions for Tori? Questions for me relative to anything else that was in the report? Okay, not seeing any. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Turn it back over to you.
Yes, well, thank you, Chris, Tori, and Mary for that. I know next year I'll be wearing my Mike Singleton jersey. Not because of the council turning 50, but because it's my turn to turn 50 next year too. And that's a tendency I have, is to get a jersey of the year, except for 42, because I'm a big Doug Adams fan, and 42's got its whole other meaning. All right, so with that, as I had mentioned, what I'd like to do, and apologies to Mike again, I'd like to go to the liaison reports first. So I'm going to go with the South Atlantic, and then Ted, you're going to be up for New England after that. So go ahead, Carrie. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for accommodating my schedule. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry for anyone that it may have messed up. Our council met September 15th through 19th in Charleston. We discussed the executive orders to which Chris referred to earlier. We finished our letter to submit on EO 14276. As Chris mentioned, it has been linked for y'all, so I won't get into the details of what we put in there. For the most part, you could call our council meeting a snapper grouper meeting more than a council meeting. That's what we spent the majority of our time talking about. Of interest is We're looking at the potential for state management of red snapper. As you've heard many times, red snappers are a problem child, followed closely by black sea bass. But there's, let's just say, work outside of the council being done at the federal level to move management away, recreational red snapper management away from the council and to the states. So we're at the very early phases of getting information. This was done in the Gulf. You may or may not know. I don't know, maybe it's been like 10 years now, maybe a little less than that. It was done in the Gulf. So we're starting to hear presentations about how the different states collect their data in the Gulf and how they approach red snapper state management. So it's very early days for this. It'll be interesting to see where it goes. Again, we're still in the process of figuring out how the states would collect the data, how then the red snapper would be divvied up. At this point, there's been no discussion, nor do I think there would be discussion of red snapper commercial management moving outside of the council, but this is for recreational management. We also are looking at, we have a specific commercial snapper group or subcommittee right now that meets in advance of the council meetings. And we're trying to work on the commercial efficiency, trying to make the commercial fishery more profitable, looking at permitting issues there, and just really have the time to not be talking about recreational red snapper and to be looking at how we can help the commercial guys. So we had that meeting this week. We're in the early process of developing an amendment for that. We also are looking at taking some time out to see how we can innovatively manage the snapper grouper fishery. So we're taking a little time right now at every council meeting to get away from the what I consider sort of the get an assessment, react to it, sort of reactive approach to management. And we're taking, a couple hours at each council meeting, thinking about really big picture, throw out ideas. Nothing is too crazy to talk about. We even broke from sitting at the table and had sticky wall sessions. We did it all to try to think about how we can sort of break out of this reactive cycle we've been in. So this was the first time we did this. So there's not a lot to report, but it was really, I would say that I think everyone really got something out of getting up from the table, working in these brainstorming sessions, and just being able to say, what if we did this, and not have to get into the, well, it won't work because of this. Like, we're just really trying to think big. So we'll see what comes out of that. But it was an interesting exercise for sure. We're also looking at revising our snapper grouper management unit. I think we started with like 72 in the 90s, 72 species. We're down to 55. We need to get down even more. We're obviously not ever going to get 55 stock assessments for some of these species. So we're trying to figure out if we can remove any species from the management unit, whether they become ecosystem components or whether they just become unmanaged or managed by the states, so that we can streamline and be more effective at managing the snapper grouper species that are recreationally and commercially important. As I'm sure you know a little bit about, we're also working on black sea bass. Our black sea bass assessment is pretty dire. We're taking a two-prong approach to what we're going to do with black sea bass. We have a reg amendment coming up where we're going to go ahead and try to cut effort in half across the board, sort of preemptively. We know it's coming. We haven't sort of gotten the official letter because we're still working on some stock assessment issues, but we know that there is a decline. So we are going to preemptively reduce effort by a good bit, about 50% in this reg amendment. And then we're going to go back through a full plan amendment to look at things like allocation and size limits and things like that we need to do. Yellowtail and mutton, we co-manage with the Gulf, so we're working on that. And then getting to blue line tilefish, as you all spoke about earlier this week. We are also doing a two-prong approach for blue line tile. We are going to do a framework to quickly get through the 2026, to get the 2026 ACL going, and then we will come back with a full plan amendment to discuss both sector allocations and possibly any jurisdictional allocations that we work through together. That is our longer term plan with blue line tilefish. We will be having a public hearing for our framework in Kitty Hawk in December, if anyone is interested. And then really the only other non-snapper grouper item we talked about is we have a very interesting issue with, we have Oculine, a habitat area of particular concern. Some people call it the first marine protected area in the United States. I'm not exactly sure that that's true, but it is an area of rare coral that happens off of basically Cape Canaveral, Florida. Way back in the 70s and 80s, that area was trawled. Some of that area was worked around by the shrimp, the rock shrimp fishery and the calico scallop fishery. And certainly at the time in the 70s and 80s, there was some destruction, although anyone who knows who trawls knows that you're not running your trawl over high profile coral very successfully. So long story short, the council, there's the area outside of that is just adjacent to it that the rock shrimp fishery has wanted access to. There's no coral there. It is a mud area. That access was granted, 10 or 15 years ago, but when the final rule was published, someone put the numbers in wrong. So they were not given the total access that they really needed. Since then, we've been trying to fix this problem. It literally has been a matter of just adjusting the numbers again to mud. But unfortunately, it has sort of blown up, and there's this perception that possibly we're allowing the shrimpers to shrimp over the coral, which is not the case. And again, they wouldn't want to if we did. So we took action. We've been taking action for a while, but at this last meeting, we finished our preferreds, and hopefully we'll take final action in December to, after at least a decade, to allow them back into the area that they have always should have had access to. So that's the quick and dirty, and I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any. And again, thank you so much. I'm so sorry.
No, thank you. Any questions on the South Atlantic report? Rich, go ahead.
Thank you so much for that update. I'm really curious, are there any details you can share with us about the commercial profitability discussions you've had? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So one of the things you guys may or may not know is that we have a 2-for-1 provision for our commercial snapper grouper permit. So anytime a new entrant wants to come into the fishery, they have to buy 2 permits and retire 1. This went into place in 1998. At the time, there was, I don't know, I want to say like 1,200 commercial snapper grouper permits. There absolutely was overcapacity at the time, and a lot of overfishing was happening. In those subsequent 25, almost 30 years, the commercial fishery effort has been reduced down to 500 permits, many of those which aren't even active. I think the last time I heard there was about, 300 something full-time active boats. But those permits remain very expensive. It's very expensive to buy 2, and that obviously raises the barrier to entrance to new fishers. I think our average age, my husband's one of them, he's 64. I think he's among the younger of the fleet. So one of the things that is looking like a preferred right now is to remove the 2-for-1 provision and go for straight. It'd still be limited entry, but you only need 1 to get in. We're also talking about using various provisions with trip limits, instead of having, say, we have a 1,000-pound trip limit for vermilion snapper. The commercial fleet is not meeting any of its ACLs. So what we're talking about doing is not restraining them, in the same way by trip limits and having step up and step down provisions within the season. So those are the 2 that are really floating to the top right now. Other things have been discussed, less favorable, but permit stacking, allowing for bycatch trip limits, things like that. Our AP meets next week, and we will be talking to them more about it. So.
Okay, great. Thank you both. Any other questions? Not seeing anything. Just one more thank you here. And I just want to say, I think there's some important things for us to be tracking even outside of the species specific management stuff. So appreciate, the OtterBox thinking that's going on down there. And also, you know, I've said it before, and I appreciate Jason's presentation yesterday, but just looking to the Gulf for their data collection stuff on wreck fisheries, I think is important for all of us. I think, you know, they're kind of cutting edge there. Is you know, the stuff that Jason presented on, I think really is going to move the ball forward. So thank you. And apologies to Ted. So we're going to go to the New England report, and we have a new liaison for those of you that don't know. So apologies to both Ted and Bobby. But Bobby, if you have the liaison report for the New England Council, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know most people here are familiar with the reports that we would get from New England from Mr. Hughes. They were very eloquent and educational, and I think you'll see that this one is almost exactly nothing like that. The New England meeting council met in September. I think the prescription's run out of my glasses. Met September 23rd to 25th in Gloucester, Massachusetts. They had a few things of interest that they moved forward. Their management flexibility action, they decided to continue to move forward on. First thing, they had the election of officers. Dan Salerno is chairman and Melanie Griffin is vice chair. And let's see, the habitat meeting took no action. Same thing for climate and ecosystem. Monkfish and skates, we've already gone over that. The only other thing that I think would be of concern to, or of interest to the Scholar Committee report, and the council decided to move forward on a framework to partition out the usage of open bottom days by area, the northern and southern area. Not quite sure how that's going to be fleshed out, but that's one of the outcomes of that particular meeting. And the final thing on their agenda was the on-demand gear workshop, which spawned a rather vibrant and colorful discussion because there was over 130 participants in the room during that, and it was interesting. Not a lot of positive things said, but it was worth the price of admission anyway. Kept me on my toes. Other than that, Ted, if you got anything you want to add, because I realize this is a very kindergartenish version of what a liaison report should be, but I'm trying.
Yeah, I think that covered it pretty well. I was told I wasn't going to be preparing anything, so I didn't. And a good portion of it came down here with Monk and Dog, so that was the bulk of our meeting. And yeah, it was interesting having the lobster community there. They literally surrounded the room and filled one side of it. And I've never quite, had that feeling before where I was like, yeah, we can't leave if we want to. And I had the good fortune of wearing my Mass Lobstermen Association vests that day too. So it was interesting. It was an interesting experience.
Yeah, it sounds like some good fortune there. Yes, and my apologies. That was purely my ad lib trying to throw it to you. So thank you. And Bobby, that was a great report. Much appreciated. So with that'll conclude our liaison reports for the two other councils. We'll go into our organizational, I think, report singular. So I'll turn to Mike Pentney on the Garfield report.
All right, thanks, Mr. Chair. I have a few things to report on. Let's see, back in August, I think this was before the council meeting, so I'm not sure why it's on the list. But anyway, we published a temporary rule implementing a 2,000-pound possession limit for herring management 1A. That expires December 31st. We are still waiting for a final rule for the herring specs, which would increase the quota, in which point we would reopen 1A under the higher quota until the 92% of that revised quota, should it get implemented, is reached. But until such time, it's down to 2,000 pounds. On September 15th, we published temporary rule closing the Atlantic mackerel fishery effective September 16th. That's required when we project that 80% of the domestic annual harvest has been taken. With that closure in effect, the possession limit for limited access mackerel vessels is 10,000 pounds per trip. And for open access mackerel vessels is 2,500 pounds per trip. Vessels may only land mackerel once per day, calendar day, and the temporary rule is through the end of the year. We then published a final rule on September 23rd for the 2025-2026 specs for mackerel, squid, and butterfish, which really just reaffirmed the existing 2025 specs for mackerel, Atlantic mackerel, chub mackerel, ilex, and longfin, but it increased the butterfish specs quotas. It also reduces the minimum size for square mesh used on directed butterfish trawl trips from 3 inches to greater than 2 5/8 inches, as was recommended by the council. That rule will be effective on October 23rd, so it's still not actually in place. On September 29th, right before the shutdown, we published a temporary rule to increase the Winter 2 commercial scup quota and possession limit. This is the normal rollover from unused Winter 1 quota into Winter 2. And then the possession limit is increased based on the amount of the rollover from Winter 1 to Winter 2. So that will increase the commercial scup quota in Winter 2 to 4.1 million pounds and increase the possession limit to 15,000 pounds per trip. That's all I had for formal announcements of actions. I did want to note, just for everybody, and I mentioned this to Bob Beal and Tony Kearns last week, that we are still continuing to monitor weekly landings reports for all of our stocks that are quota based. And we have authority and actually direction to close any fishery when a quota trigger is reached. That has implications in particular for summer flounder and bluefish, where we manage state by state quotas, because we're monitoring the state landings and we're told to implement state closures, but what we're not allowed to do is process transfers. So if a state during the shutdown is getting close to its summer flounder, say, or bluefish state quota, we would close the fishery even if there's a quota transfer in the works, because we can't process the quota transfer. So I'm just flagging that the quota reports are not being updated on the web, but I am getting weekly updates. So if any state is interested in what our data are currently showing for their landings of fluke or bluefish, please give me a shout and I'll be happy to share what I have. The last thing that I have is mostly of interest to the New England Council. I talked about this at their, but just for information's sake, NIMS, we received a petition under the Endangered Species Act from the Center for Biological Diversity to list cusk as a threatened or endangered species under the ESA. We received that back in July. The petition also requests that we identify or designate critical habitat. So there's a process that we undertake when we receive a petition for listing to determine first whether the petition presents any substantial information suggesting that the petition may be warranted. And the may is important because the outcome of that initial review is either what's called a positive 90-day finding or a negative 90-day finding. Means that we found nothing in the petition that merits further consideration, and that ends the process. There's no further review. A positive 90-day finding does not mean that listing is warranted. It means that a status review is warranted. And so it means that the petition, there may be some merit to the petition, and so we undertake a year-long process to do a full status review. And the conclusion of the status review is either no, the species should not be listed as endangered, or yes, it should be. And so where we are right now with this cusk petition is we're doing the 90-day review. That's obviously been delayed in part because of the shutdown. So at some point over presumably the next few months, once we're back at work, we'll announce our decisions in a Federal Register notice, and I'll certainly inform the councils whether we've reached a negative 90-day finding, again, which ends the process, or whether we've reached a positive 90-day finding and that we're undertaking a status review. If we do a status review, at that point, we reach out to the states, to the public, to interested parties, and we look for new information, any information anyone might have about CUSC that we should consider when we do the status review. We don't do that if it's a negative determination because, as I said, it ends the process. So just, keep that in mind. We'll be working with New England Council on anything they might want to do related to that, because CUSC obviously is more of an issue for the New England Council of Fisheries, but thought the Mid-Atlantic Council should understand that we're working on that as well. And we also have something similar for horseshoe crabs, which I've mentioned a couple times. We are still working on our 90-day finding more than a year and a half after receiving the petitions. So you can see how those things sometimes go.
Thank you, Mike. Questions for Mike or eggs to be thrown? No, I'm kidding. Don't egg the messenger. But in all honesty, Mike, the thought that the transfers aren't getting processed is certainly concerning. At the state level, I think I speak for all state directors. The ability to do that for some species has been just fantastic. Bluefish, summer flounder on the commission side, menhaden. And dogfish is really one that I think it's really been a tremendous help to that fishery to make sure that the quota is where the fish are. So that is unfortunate. So I just wanted to add that personally, but any other questions for Mike? Jason?
Just want to kind of highlight that butterfish mesh change is a small change, but kind of is like a neat story of like how the council process can work. I think it was maybe like 2.5 years ago, the Sea Freeze folks and Emerson Hasbrook of Cornell flagged this would be useful to have this other mesh to use, and Cornell had done the study. But when they first brought it up, it was just after the council had set specs for a 2-year cycle. So it was kind of out of cycle. I said, okay, well, flag this again in a 1.5 years when the council spins up butterfish specs, which they did. And the council then said, yeah, okay, Jason, think about that in specs. And we worked with the service to make sure that the research that had been done was applicable enough. And eventually through that AP process and then participating in the council, now it's in effect. But I mean, it really was like a 3 or 4 year process, even of pushing it. Never mind, I forget when the initial study was done. But anyway, it was kind of even though it took a long time, it was kind of a neat story of how the process can work of using an advisory panel process to put information to the council and then eventually get something changed.
Thank you, Jason. I see a hand online. Chris Batsavage, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the report, Mike. On the quota transfer issue, in the past, Garfo staff have informed us that if they receive quota transfer letters that both states agree upon, and the transfer is kind of in process, they consider that transfer kind of in process if a state's coming up against their allocation, and therefore may delay closing that state's fishery if they know that they got transfers in the works. Of course, that was when the government was open. Is that a possibility in this interim period while during the federal shutdown, that if states put in a quota transfer request, and that could be considered while you're doing the monitoring and see that states approaching or has hit their level, that maybe that announcement could be delayed if there's, like I said, if there's a potential transfer in the works. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I mean, you're right. I mean, when our team notices that a state is approaching its state quota, usually the first thing is reach out to the state, see if they're planning any actions to either slow the landings or close the fishery themselves, or, you know, looking for a transfer, and then how likely is the transfer. And certainly if the transfer is going to come in, we would prioritize processing the transfer, so then the closure is not needed. We're in a bit of a tough spot right now. We don't have staff to even receive the quota transfer requests, much less process them for the Federal Register, so they can't be approved. And the quota closures, that's the only thing we have staff looking at, is what's the quota, what's the trigger, and then, you know, should a closure notice. But I guess if I'm aware, hint, hint, if I'm aware that there's a quota transfer in the works, then, you know, that might allow me to consider that when pushing forward the closure notice. I guess that's all I'll say.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Chris. Any other questions or comments from council members? Okay, thank you again, Mike. Not seeing any. So that brings us, I believe, to our last agenda item, which is other business and general public comment. We don't have any other business. So I will look to the public. Is there any general public comment? Okay, not seeing any. Well, we did it. We got through another week. My first meeting week. I want to thank all of you for bearing with me. Thanks to staff for getting us through, and especially for all the pinch hitting that needed to happen here. So thank you, everyone. Safe travels. Another great meeting week in Philly, I believe. So thank you.